Hey followers, this is your boy, movie maker Doug 55. Today I'm at San Francisco and you can see the Golden Gate Bridge behind me. I came here because Andy doesn't like the moon background for some reason, but it still works. So today I have a very special guest, Marc Furmie. He's a Christian film producer that Andy connected me with, and he's going to share his incredible story. Welcome, Marc.
Thank you for having me, Doug and Andy.
Yeah, no worries, mate. And thanks, Doug, for the intro. Yes, I actually am a bit tired of you being on the moon. I don't trust you up there. You've got big telescopes. You reckon you're watching everybody. So I'd rather you in San Francisco, mate. Thank you.
Right.
Hey, Marc. Thanks for coming on. I know you're a busy man, and you'll share a bit of that at the moment. But just quickly, how Marc and myself met was quite funny. It was through another friend of ours who lived in Perth, still lives in Perth, Western Australia. And Jay contacted me on, was on Facebook or something. He noticed I was living in LA and he said, "Oh, look, I've never met you, but I'm coming to Los Angeles, so I'd like to catch up with you." I said, "Yeah, cool, man." So I'm sitting on a plane a few weeks later, ready to head off to LA. And I get a text message before we take off. And it's like, "Jay here, Andy, I think you just walked past me." I went, what? I'm looking around the plane. There's Jay sitting a few seats away. And I said, "Oh, well, we wanted to meet up. Well, might as well meet up before we get to LA. And next thing he introduced me to Marc, and we've all been friends ever since. So it's funny how things happen, hey?
Yeah.
And it's been, been a good journey. I've worked with Marc's an incredible writer, and I've been fortunate enough to be in a film that was called In Like Flynn, which was a story about the great Australian actor Errol Flynn. And Marc wrote that, correct, Marc?
Co-wrote, yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool. It's a great story. But anyway, I'll hand it back to you, Doug, and you can head off with some incredibly inquisitive questions.
For sure, and it's a pleasure to be talking with you, Marc. I respect that you're a Christian producer. I really respect that about you. So my first one that I have is, how did you get to where you are?
Well, how far back do you want me to go?
Yeah, just tell me a little bit about how you became the well-known producer that you've become.
Oh, I mean, I don't know about well-known, but I guess I consider myself a director more than a producer. But in the last maybe 12 months, I've transitioned into that role of producing. But if we're to talk about where I started as a director, I mean, I've wanted to make films since I was 5 years old. I've wanted to, I had that dream in my heart after, watching Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back and Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's a cliche, but I had grandparents and parents that fostered that dream and encouraged it and took me to the movies a lot. And so when I finished high school, and I was making little shorts in school. But when I finished, I went to art school. I actually studied fine arts at the New South Wales College of Fine Arts in Sydney, Australia. And I learnt more about the theory of what we call time-based art, which is a little bit more art-based than film-based. So that was kind of frustrating that at university I wanted to learn a very literal form of storytelling, but I was being forced to, watch installation films and very experimental films like Meshes of the Afternoon. And on the side, I was making like music videos and short films. And I kind of like lost interest in university. I dragged a 3-year degree out to 6.5 years, basically because I just had no interest in being there. And, a couple of traumatic things happened to me during my time at university. I was stabbed in my face whilst working in a nightclub, and one of my best friends took his own life. And that kind of like, I don't know, it kind of made me withdraw from the conformity of education. So I stepped outside of that, and I met a cinematographer named Carl Robertson, who, you know, we both were believers, but I wouldn't have called us Christians at the time. We're very much in the industry, in the world, as you would say. But we became really close, and Carl kind of like took me under his wing. He was working at the ABC as a cameraman, and he taught me everything I needed to know about the business, about all the technical aspects of shooting. And he himself is like a prodigy from Adelaide. You know, grew up on the streets. You know, had a rough upbringing, and but was like employed by the ABC when he was a teenager, and so walked in this long line of great footsteps behind other DPs from Adelaide, especially, to become a world-class cinematographer. And so we kind of took our journey together, and we just started making shorts on the side. We made a short film in my final year at university called Rendezvous, and then I got government funding. Even while I was still in university, I got government funding to make a short called Death's Requiem, about an artist who was dying of lung cancer, whose creation comes to life to haunt him. And I used to smoke. You know, I pretty much took up smoking when I was 17 or 16, and I had this guilt, almost Catholic guilt complex about smoking cigarettes. And my first job, you know, out of high school was working in nightclubs, you know, as a glassier or a barback, as you would call them here. And so I was very much, I couldn't get out of that world of like, you know, smoking and drinking and carrying on. And so this film was like a reaction against that. It was like me processing that addiction. And then that film was like funded by the Australian Film Commission at the time, now called Screen Australia. And they gave us like $200,000 to make a short film, which is unheard of today.
Yeah.
And I think we were one of the last projects to get that kind of funding, which was pretty monumental. It helped me take this monumental leap from being like a amateur filmmaker to being a professional filmmaker.
Yeah, that's amazing that you got back then. You got 200,000. Like people struggle to even attempt to get anywhere, even quarter of that now. But you know, their new projects. So that's cool.
Yeah, my journey with film began in high school a few years back when I was in my first couple years of high school. I was a part of the drama club there where I acted kind of as an extra for a couple plays. Yeah. And I was also in a multimedia class in my junior and senior years.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just, you know, talking about the arts, sorry, Doug, but I've just got to keep an eye on the time. But just talking about the arts, see what Doug just shared then and what you shared, I find, and myself, my journey of being an actor for, you know, some 30 years, when I didn't start till I was 38 years old, it's something that's inside you. Like I've never wanted to be an actor. It was going to happen anyway. Yeah. Or I was going to be involved in the arts. So what I'm getting at is a lot of people want to be actors and they'll go and train and they'll make a career out of it. Some won't, but there's a lot of people that don't have that interest, but their life guides you, like you just shared all that little journey you had, and something was pulling you away. Like my version of it, something kept pulling me out of all the jobs I had, the relationships I broke up, the anger I was dealing with all my life, the gangs, the drugs. And let me tell you, like, I'm not saying this is a proud thing at all. Don't want anyone to get me wrong, but we hear a lot of people's stories of saying, oh, you know, like he had a rough upbringing and now he's amazing. Well, yeah, that's life. That's exactly what happens. And some people can have an amazing upbringing and still have an amazing life, or have an amazing upbringing and things don't work out the way they want. You know, and it just depends. No, that's not even the right word. It's in there. I couldn't stop it. It was just taking me in that direction to eventually, because I was in martial arts, then I went to judo, then pro wrestling for 10 years. And it was the pro wrestling that got me into acting as a pro wrestler for a commercial for Hungry Jackson in Adelaide. And that was it. I went, oh, wow, this is lovely. And 30 years later, now I'm creating not only acting and mentoring, but things like this, where now we're inviting other people on to share their stories.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think I was
incredible.
Probably pretty anomalous in that sense, is that because I knew from a very young age what I wanted to do, and I've never ever deviated from it, which is very odd. You know, like I don't think I've known many other. I mean, there are a lot of other directors out there that have the same story, but in my circle of friends and family, I knew very few people who had as much tenacious kind of rigid, stubborn adherence to this dream, you know.
Yeah.
And to the point where it became like an idol, you know. Like I was literally living, breathing, eating, sleeping cinema. There was a bookstore in Sydney, you know, Liverpool Street, called the Cinestore, and I'd be there every day. I'd be just sitting in the corner of the bookstore reading all the film books, you know.
Yeah. Well, Marc, you know, just while you're on that, because there's a lot of, I send these links to a lot of actors and that, and this whole program, like, as I said, we've got such a playlist of different people. We have martial artists who've become actors or involved in acting or anti-bullying, or they've all had a journey of, you know, difference. Then we have people, you know, who are impacted by vision impairment or hearing impairment, or, you know, accidents that's put them in wheelchairs. And we've had some incredible people, like, and it's what you just said is every one of those people have made a choice. And the purpose of this whole series is like Doug, you know, he made choices. Someone gave him a little hint about when he was a teenager in school that, oh, I hear you like writing. Why don't you write a book? And here he is, 8 books later, bestseller on, or not bestseller, but he's up around 300 on Amazon for his books. Now, he was relentless in his journey, and I guess once I knew I loved acting, I was relentless there too. But your story I like because you never gave up. So what would your message be to actors who, or any creative person who says, I want to do this? I know you've just said it, like you were relentless, but what advice can you give them beyond listening to other people who go, don't do it, it's not enough money, forget it, it's a dead end, you know, it's too hard? What advice can you give to any creative person, whether they're a writer, or want to be a director, producer, whatever, or anything in life?
I think at the end of the day, it's about knowing why you're doing it. I mean, in the early, you know, probably till recently, you know, till I almost made In Like Flynn. You know, I kind of put this whole thing on a pedestal and was very, you know, diligently wanting to make movies because I love the art form. I love storytelling, and was addicted to it. But in the last maybe 5 or 6 years, I've changed the reason for why I've rediscovered a deeper reason for why I want to do it. And I think the only way you can remain committed to something is if your reason for wanting to do it comes from a very deep and convicted place. And, you know, wanting to just make films, I think was not enough ultimately. And that was the point. That was a crossroad where the dream could have died easily. And I almost had to surrender it completely. I had to go, okay, it's not just about, you know, wanting to be the next David Fincher or the next Christopher Nolan or the next Steven Spielberg. It's about why am I telling these stories? And the moment you know, and I always had this like idealistic notion that stories could change the world. And the movies that I love the most are the ones that have the most emotional impact, you know. But ultimately I had to realign my paradigm and reauthor the conclusion that I wasn't doing this for myself anymore, that I'm serving a greater purpose.
The best advice that I can give you is we all write our own stories. We can do what we want if we set our mind to it.
Absolutely, you know. And yeah, it's not giving up, I think, has to come from the reason why you're doing it in the first place. And if you can constantly remind yourself of why, then it's easier to get back on the horse when you've fallen off. And there were some extremely tough periods. You know, the GFC was hard because I'd made 2 award-winning shorts. I'd been signed to a very famous production company in Australia to make commercials. Then the GFC hit and all the work dried up around the whole country. And literally the next 4 years was very, very tough until I made Terminus my feature film. And then following, like, Terminus was a bit of a high, and even though the film wasn't that great, it was amazing to accomplish that. And then the disappointment of that film not doing what I wanted it to do, or not being as good as I thought it could have been, really crippled me for a couple of years, you know. And I was literally relegated to the wilderness of TV commercials. I was shooting commercials in Southeast Asia, you know.
Wow.
I was like Christopher Walken in The Deer Hunter, you know.
Yeah.
I was like lost in the jungle a little bit. And then
it's funny. Hey, Marc, just quickly there, I'll dive in. I'll remind you, next time we go and have a coffee at Aroma, the author of The Deer Hunter goes there.
Oh, great.
Had a massive conversation. Sorry, I jumped in there, but keep going.
Okay. Yeah, please.
Can I jump in to ask another question?
Yeah, sure.
So, tell me about your Christian journey. Has it been interesting?
I mean, the Christianity is such a loaded word these days. I mean, it's ascribed to an organization. It's subscribed to a religious thinking. But I think, you know, for me, Christianity, I wasn't raised in a religious household. I was actually born into a Muslim family, a non-practicing Muslim family. I mean, my grandpa was born Muslim, but I don't think he had a Jewish mother. And I think because of that, he was torn between the two faiths and rejected both of them.
Oh, wow.
So, and he didn't like any sort of fundamentalism. He didn't like any, you know, I mean, he'd go to the mosque and tie all the shoelaces together of all the men that were inside praying, and they'd come out and start swearing. So he didn't have much. So my mother grew up in a household that, you know, had peripheral people around the family, aunts, uncles, grandparents, who were very deeply entrenched in the Islamic faith. But my mother wasn't indoctrinated in any sense, but she grew up with this love of God, you know, a love of this person that you just know is there, you know, with you. And that's how she viewed God. And my mother had me quite young and moved me to the States. She was a single mum, and she'd always told me to pray growing up, you know, a little simple prayer. And then she ended up working for Muhammad Ali. So she ended up working for one of the biggest figures in the Islamic world, you know, at the time.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
But she still felt that the answers weren't in that faith, you know, in the fatalism of that faith. And she knew there was God, you know. She knew God was somewhere, and that he was with her. I mean, I won't even go into the darkness of her experiences growing up in apartheid.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's many times where her life was in danger, even when she was married, that, you know, or pregnant with me, where she, you know, felt like there was no way out, but there was a voice speaking to her. So,
are you writing films about that journey?
Not at this stage, but I think down the track I will, you know, explore her experiences. And
my Christian journey has kind of been up and down. Like, what started my faith was back in 2004 when I was in first grade. I think I was 6 years old at the time. While at a play group in my hometown of Estes Park, Colorado, we went to the Rocky Mountain National Park, the wilderness area. I got lost. And what happened was I encountered a black bear. And it had cubs, and that's like a death sentence for, you know, something. I hid behind a bush, and it didn't notice me. And what happened was, you know, I said a prayer asking to be taken out of the mess, and the bear walked off and didn't notice me. And when it was gone, I encountered an angel, and it pointed in a direction like this. And the moment I went in that direction, I found the group again, and I was back.
Wow.
Wow.
And that the only thing that I regret about this book is that I didn't include that story in here.
Yeah, you should definitely. That should be your opening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, you know, it's difficult, and that's really great, Doug. It's the first time I've heard it. And yeah,
I actually went public with it in 2017. And I just wish I would have put it at the intro of this book, but I made up for it by putting it in the intro of Ray Guns of Chronos, War on Quantinsville.
Well, you've also just declared it on here, so that's fine. You know, you've got to share it on your YouTube channel, and that's what I love about you know, humanity. You're free to, you know, believe what you want. Certain places, I know it can cause, you know, unrest and all that, but it's good that you're brave enough, you know, to share what happened to you, and you're not worried about what people think or don't think, you know.